Welcome back to The Pod is the Roof, the official UNC basketball podcast of the Field of 68. I am your host, Riley Davis, joined today by Ross Martin of 247 Sports, the national college editor of CBS Sports as well, and the host of the Big Hitters Only podcast. Ross, how are you doing tonight, man?
What's up, Riley? Good. Happy to be on. Excited for what y'all doing over there in Pause the Roof, and looking forward to talking a little Carolina basketball, maybe some football. Who knows?
Oh yeah, we might have to dabble a little bit into this football coaching search at the end, but just to tease
I've
the listeners for a little bit. But
I've been locked into football, man. It's like after the three games in Maui, my attention turned. Those are late nights too. Like
yep.
I feel like a lot of people didn't stay up and watch it, so I was trying to find some people to go on my podcast, and like no one watched all three games, and so I've been locked into this coaching search with football. So I got to kind of set up for basketball now with Bama around the corner.
I feel you. I did stay up for all three games, somewhat regretfully. That Auburn game in particular, I was like, I can't believe I stayed up just to watch
Yeah.
Carolina play good for like a 5 minute stretch and then play horrible the rest of the night. But yeah, I feel like I have been locked in on this coaching search as well, just looking for some excitement because if I'm being honest, showing in Maui was pretty discouraging for Tar Heel fans. I think it's not all for naught. There's still some things to like about this team. Very clear talent in the backcourt and on the perimeter, but also a lot of shortcomings and even some deficiencies that I would say, like from a I don't know. I have a little probably a bit more cynical view. Just with where this team stands to where I wonder if some of these issues can be corrected. But let's start with that, Ross. What did you learn about this team just watching them in the Maui Invitational?
Yeah, I think shortcomings is a good word there. I think, and I've been kind of saying this when I talk to people, via text and just with buddies and group chats and stuff. I think there's two big issues that are going to be hard to fix. I think UNC has very short guards, and when they're good, they're good, and when they're nailing threes and get to the basket, they are very talented guards in RJ Davis and Elliot Cadeau. But they are very short. And I think against bigger guards and bigger competition, they struggled in the lane and they missed so many kind of open shots. Not open shots, but like they struggle when they're challenged in the lane and when they have to like when their shots disrupted. I think it really affects what they're able to do and they're not getting as easy of looks. I don't think we got in transition. I don't think UNC got in transition enough against Auburn and Michigan State. It feels so long ago, the Dayton game. Um, and that's when they thrive. They don't thrive as much in the half court.
Right.
I think Elliot Cadeau is so nasty in transition, and UNC didn't get out in transition enough, and that's when they can get the easy buckets. And even then, I feel like RJ and Elliot just struggle so much to score in the lane because they're short. You've been around
Mhm.
them. They're 5'11". They're not 6'1". They're not 6'2". They're 5'11", 6 feet. And that's something you can't fix. You can't fix. You can't teach height. Second issue, and everyone knows this is what we feared. UNC does not have much talent or size in the front court. And so these guys are, I mean, Jalen Withers and Jalen Washington, I hate to say it, but they are not like ACC, high Power Five level starters. Like they're sixth men, seventh men, like bench players for a team like UNC, or any kind of high level top 25 type team. Van Allen Lubin, he's kind of the same way, like maybe the fifth option, maybe the sixth
Mhm.
option on the team. And you're kind of seeing that there's no offense run through the big men. There's no reliable, hey, let's go get 10 and 10. We've
Right.
seen splashes. Like you're like, all right, Jalen Washington's kind of playing pretty well. All right, Jalen Washington does it, but there's just not a consistent scoring threat in the front court. And I think when they need like a half court offense or something where you're like, all right, let's start with the post to Baycott, that's not there. Offensive rebounding is not there. And they're getting out rebounded as well, in a lot of these matchups as well. So I think those are the two main things that are kind of not fixable right
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, to the end of like playing with shorter guards. On one hand, I think last year part of why it worked well was because of the gravity that Armando Bacot commanded. And you could say what you will. I know like some Carolina fans were quick to complain about Armando, where it's like, man, I would kill for Armando to be on this team.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, he's was really oddly enough, because he played in college so long, probably went through a cycle of being underrated and then overrated, then back to being underrated with what he provided defensively. But even just thinking about like the way that these guards get into the lane and where you saw it against Michigan State, where they got packed a lot of times when they try to get to the basket. When you have someone like Armando who's commanding attention there, who is a threat on the roll when you're running those high ball screens, it opens up so much more. And you take that away, you got bigs who can hard hedge on those ball screens. You have guards who can play that more aggressively and neutralize RJ a bit. I think that's some of his struggles. And even if you go back and watch that UNC Tennessee game from this time last year in the Dean Dome, and part of it I know is the way Tennessee plays defense, the way that they pack the paint, and how they've found success under Rick Barnes. But there was essentially like three guys paying attention to Armando that whole game. And that opened up, I believe RJ, if I'm not mistaken, had a 30-point game that night where so much more was open for him to, yeah, I still think even with the height deficiency, so to speak, with RJ, with Ellie Cadeau, with Seth, there's ways to get around it if you have someone step up. But the front court to me is like, uh, I mean, is it as bad as we thought it might be, or as much of a problem as it might be? Because, I think you have to keep playing Jalen Washington. Just he's the only one who's 6'10" or in that ballpark. He's the only one with a 7 foot wingspan, and you kind of got to keep giving him minutes and hope that it figures out. But it was in Maui, it was the mental lapses that I think really drove Carolina fans crazy, whether it was mishandling passes. I mean, he had the hook and hold. I think that was against Auburn, picking up ticky tack fouls. And even that second half against Michigan State, both he and Withers weren't really providing much resistance at all around the rim, like missed timing, going up for blocks. Even if they just try to stay vertical, a lot of times would still foul. And I just kind of thought there would be one of these options, probably Washington, maybe Withers, to be a tad like a higher floor player at the five.
Yeah, I mean, and like Washington's not like some beast. He's not that tall, and he's not definitely not like super strong. And Withers is super undersized. So is Lubin. Lubin's probably the strongest guy. And I think you're right with the kind of, I don't want to talk too much about like missing Baycott, but he did provide a gravity. And Roy Williams coach teams, you'd have two of those guys who would, sometimes get a double team, or you had to defend, you had to pay attention to the big men that were in the high post or low post. And that opened up, shots and opened up driving lanes. And I think defenses against UNC can really press out on the guards,
Mm-hmm.
and any type of big guard is going to give RJ Davis and Cadeau a lot of issues. I don't know what UNC is going to do with the big men. So let's looking at the stats just from the three games in Maui, and Jalen Withers averaged 23.8 minutes per game. So he was played the most out of the three we've spoken of. And then really Washington and Val Lubin were below 20. Washington had 17.7 minutes per game. He was taken out at some points of the last two, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and Lubin only played 14.7. They really leaned on Drake Powell at the four, and then kind of rotated those three, here and there at the four, but mostly at the five. And Drake Powell got 25.6. So he was getting way more minutes, and that's not even to mention the lack of playing time for a guy like Cade Tyson. Look, I would see what James Brown could do too. It seems like they have surprisingly played him a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but it's tough. There's just not one guy standing out. I think, dude, I don't know. You kind of want to say one name and you kind of think about their deficiencies. I mean, I think
Right.
Lubin has the most experience, maybe provides a little bit more bulk down low. I think Withers is super athletic and makes some athletic plays, but he is not providing you with too much offense. He can hit some threes, which is reassuring, but you don't want to hurt Washington's confidence either. So
Yeah.
you've got three guys here, and I don't know, man. It's kind of gonna be. I think it's gonna be an issue for a while. I don't see it getting super. I mean, they're juniors and seniors, right? They're not gonna drastically improve over the course of the next couple of months.
With Withers, the thing that like even his athleticism, I get that it's needed in spurts, but at the same time, I think it's a lot less functional than you would hope. Like, how many times do we see him fall on the floor in Maui? How many times do we see him try to attack the rim and it ends up in a turnover, or yeah, he stumbles where it's like I get he can jump high, but like the coordination, the fluidity is it's not there. And even thinking about there's one possession in particular, this would go in as like we can touch on the defense as well, because that's where I'm most curious to see how Hubert adjusts, dare I say, how he pivots, alters, and tweaks the defense, the scheme that they've been playing with, like the whole switching. I believe I could be wrong, but against Michigan State, I think they were switching 1 through 5 and didn't work. It got honestly torched. I think Michigan State scored on 8 straight possessions in the second half, and it's reminiscent of how it didn't work last year either. It was that they switched everything leading into the Oklahoma game, completely changed the scheme, and were elite, 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 elite on that end the rest of the season. But it was one of those possessions where Jalen Withers got switched on to Jaden Akins against Michigan State. I believe you had Cadeau maybe on Cohen Carr, and it might have been RJ or Seth on Xavier Booker. They spread the court. I mean, Xavier Booker's known as a 3-point shooter, and they can pull your bigs away from the basket. But when Withers was switched on to Akins, it was like he smelled blood in the water. It just punished him, got to the rim with almost little to no resistance, and that's where I'm like, I don't think these bigs are mobile like Armando was. Who could Armando when he was healthy? We saw it last year. Could switch on to point guards and hold his own. Could switch on to perimeter players, and he'd give up threes sometimes. Like they still, he's not necessarily the most fleet of foot, but a lot more mobile than what this roster has. I'm glad
And
you
then another
mentioned.
thing, see about last year, like Harrison Ingram was a very good four and a physical, strong, bulky four. And then Cormac Ryan was a what 6'5". He played some of the two guards, some three as
Mhm.
well. I mean, he was a physical, nasty defender, and the team size was raised a little bit. Was that the front court, Harrison and
Yeah,
Baycott?
Harrison Armando.
Um, and then was it Washington off the bench and
Yeah,
Jalen Withers off
Washington
the
Withers off the bench. Pretty good
Yes, you,
rotation.
you
Yeah.
had way more trust with the veterans of Ingram and Cormac, which just raised the floor of the defense, I think. Not to even mention the offense, but you're kind of missing that big. That's where kind of we can get to Drake Powell at some point too, but like
Yeah.
that help. I mean, team defense, team size, that all that helps with rebounding, defensive rebounding, with helping, with hedging, with being a I thought Cormac, people hate on Cormac, but I thought he was just such a nasty pest. And then he also helped on offense and won some games for UNC as well. They're missing those two guys. I mean, I think this team's completely different if they had Ingram back. I don't want to, live on these what ifs and
Yeah,
stuff, but
right, right. Well, speaking of the four and even some of that nastiness, I think it's time to play your future lottery pick 30 plus minutes a night and put Drake Powell at the four. I know it's not really his natural position, but on a team that has struggled so much defensively, I want to give a shout out to Inside Carolina's own Trevor Marks. Hit me with this stat. I believe he'll probably post it at some point. But Carolina had a defensive rating of over 114 in back-to-back-to-back games in Maui. Dayton, Auburn, Michigan State. For those who are less analytically minded, I'm not super into that, but I know enough to talk about it, I guess. If you're over 100 in defensive rating, that's bad. Carolina was at 114, which is basically 114 points per 100 possessions, and that's the worst 3 game stretch as far as defensive ratings go of Hubert Davis's tenure. So that to me, I'm like something immediately has to change, and that's the good thing about them having a week off in between Michigan State and Alabama. But with Drake Powell, like he's an elite perimeter defender, can give you some of that secondary rim protection sliding over from the weak side. It's we just saw him score 18 points against Michigan State. I think it's time. It was probably honestly Ross that first game against Elon where he had a sequence where he nailed a three, got a steal, threw an alley oop to I think it was Seth, and I was like, okay, yeah, this dude is legit. He needs to be starting now. Like, let's go ahead and make this change.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so you want him to start over Jalen Withers with a four? Is that is
Yes.
that what you think?
Yes.
Yeah, and he's getting more minutes. I mean, just looking at the last same thing, looking at the last 3 games, stats right in front of me here. He played 25.6 minutes per game. He was the closing lineup against Dayton, I believe, in the most significant moments. And I believe the same thing for Michigan State. He had a great game against Michigan State. He shot 76.9% from the field, so very efficient, 10 for 13, six six for nine from three. Look at the right thing.
I think
Uh,
that's probably what he was in Maui, wasn't it? He shot really well in Maui.
yep. 6 for 9 from three against in Maui. Yep, 66%. And let's see, average just 2 rebounds. Yeah, he looks average. Yeah, just 2 rounds. He looks different on defense. Like you said, he's an elite defender. His athleticism combined with his length, he just and you see him just win possessions on defense. Like his man, he affects the shot when the guy gets to the lane. He looks different, and that's a huge. I mean, defense is critical, especially on the perimeter. And he adds that value. And then dude, the threes was surprising. I tweeted this out at some
Mhm.
point. Like seeing him hit those threes this early in his career, 6 or 7 games in. Unbelievable. And to have that confidence, it doesn't seem like it took very long. Took 2 or 3 games, and he is taking threes. He's taking big threes, and he's shooting them, and he's hitting them in a big clip. Yeah, I mean, he needs to. I don't care about starting. I mean, as long as he's playing 25 minutes, 30 minutes, you don't want to hurt the confidence of a veteran by benching him. I think that's I don't know, but I don't care about him starting. He's gonna be playing a lot. He already is playing a lot, and I think he's gonna lean on a lot more. And I think what it does, look, he's not the size of a four, so I think it kind of you got to part playing Ian Jackson more. Ian Jackson's a big card too, so you have to
Mhm.
raise the overall size of your team for rebounding and for defense. And I think if you're gonna put Drake at the four, it kind of makes you a smaller team, so you got to kind of you know shift around on the other the perimeter too. But
Yeah.
I mean, he is unbelievable. I didn't believe like I was like, you kind of hate to see him as a as an NBA prospect this early because it's you only get 1 year of this guy. But he looks so good, and he's a good kid. And it's fun to see him play. I'm excited to see how much better he gets too. Think about Ian Jackson, Drake. Now, this is the positives UNC fans need to realize is how much better they're going to be in February. Like when conference play starts kicking off in January and February, like they're gonna get so much better. And to see it this early is really reassuring, as we expect from 5 stars, right? You want
Yeah.
this. Good for
Right.
UNC recruiting.
Yeah, I'll stay on the positive with Ian Jackson. I thought he was so good in that Michigan State game. I know he missed the clutch free throws down the stretch, but he had that one step back three in the first half when UNC couldn't buy a basket. It was I haven't felt that way watching a UNC guard since Kobe White was running up and down the court, Ross. Just a big guard with big hair who can do insane stuff off the bounce. Like I
Yeah, it
want
might be. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't know like how you get him to 25 minutes a game with how well Seth has been playing, unless you just want to get RJ at 30 to 32 or something, which I mean RJ, you got to let him play through it to get out of this slump. I I wouldn't hate, some of those games. Well, you don't want RJ. You're not going to put RJ on the bench in crunch time because I'm like, man, some games where he hasn't had it, do you just lean on Jackson more? Because I think Jackson didn't play a lot down the stretch against Michigan State. But yeah, I mean, maybe you do try playing Ian Jackson at the four for spurts because it's not like the dudes you're playing at the four are like giving you a ton
Yeah,
anyway. Like,
that's
um,
crazy. One thing about Ian Jackson, I think he was good, but you see the flashes, but he is not. He plays a little out of control. He
yeah,
plays
his
like
his
kind of
defense
a
has been so
5 star
sports.
cocky freshman you expect to play. He's turning the ball over a little bit, it seems, or just playing too fast in transition where he kind of gets ahead of himself.
Mhm.
I think as he gets more time and gets more comfortable and kind of understands how to use his body and the challenge of college defenses, he'll get more comfortable. But I think you have to play him. He brings a lot. He's bigger and taller. Once he understands how important it is to play on defense, his athleticism and his length is critical. And it is tough. Like, who do you take out? You saw Cadeau get in foul trouble. That seems to be a little bit of a trend. I think he got in foul trouble at least in 2 of the games in Maui. But Seth Trimble's playing great. You don't want to, I mean, Cadeau and RJ are great. I just think you got to find a balance to get Ian Jackson some minutes. And like I said, like it's tough. He's a bigger guard, so you like to pair him with Cadeau and RJ, and maybe not run RJ and Cadeau together as much.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
tough. This is what we expected. We expected to have a really good backcourt with a lot of players. I'm not worried about RJ. I think he's still leading the team in scoring. Am I right? Yeah, still leading the team in scoring. Through 7 games, he's averaging 18.4 points per game. He had the 30-point outing against Dayton. He's just not hitting, I think, as many threes
Yeah.
as he's shooting 27% from three, so that's a little off. He's shooting a lot, but he's not making as many as he did last year. Seth Trimble, though, God, he is shooting 52% from three.
Trimble's
He's
been
been incredible
insane.
as well. It's just you just wish that the front court was there to kind of match the production and the electricity of UNC's guards.
Yeah, yeah, that's will be the big question heading into this Bama game. We'll pivot a little bit, start talking the what we're looking for out of that one. The biggest one I'm concerned to see is like who starts in this game. I know you said you don't value starters, but I just don't see how you could see Carolina's just starting the game off so slowly in Maui and getting into these huge first half
Yeah,
deficits. I think you have to shake something up. You've said it like Withers and Washington are they're not starters for good teams. I think Washington, in my opinion, you still have to let him try to get him 20 a game just to see what you have out of him to see if he can improve a little bit. It's just sometimes you see the defensive instincts there, but again, other times he's mistiming his blocks and picking up fouls. But just with him being the the only person with like, I know you said he's not the tallest, but the only one who has close to true center size. I guess James Brown maybe fits that category as well. Um, Personally, I think you gotta like it would be really not smart to go away from Drake Powell as your starting four. But who do you think? Let's say if not start, who you think should get the most minutes at the five for this one?
I always lean on the physicality and athleticism. I mean, I think it's either Withers or gosh, what's his name?
Lubin.
Yeah, Lubin. I don't know, man. It's just picking from a not a group of numbers. I mean, yeah, I would lean on Lubin and Withers a little more athleticism against a team like Bama. I haven't watched Bama play yet. I mean, I recognize all the names from last year and a lot of the guys in transfer portal too, but I think they're an athletic team with a lot of deep talent. You're gonna have who's the matchup for Grant Nelson. He killed UNC last year. But
Hmm.
I do see your point. Like UNC's fallen behind so many games now that you need that electricity coming early. So maybe you do shake it up and insert Drake Powell in the starting lineup and see what he can do from the jump. I think it's a kind of a good strategy there. I worry about a team that's got so much size and athleticism. Now, Mark Sears is not necessarily a super tall guard. He's a super talented guard and a physical guard, but he's not gonna overwhelm RJ or Elliot Cadeau
Hmm.
size wise.
Yeah, I can get. I'll give a little scoop on Alabama. I've watched them a decent amount. For the record, I just looked it up. Van Allen Lubin leads the team in dunks at with 9. I think he only had like 11 all of last year. He's the one dude who I trust every time he catches the ball rolling to the hoop that he's gonna dunk it and not fumble it. There's other questions I have of his game. Honestly going back to the summer, I was skeptical of his addition just because of the lack of height. And I don't really think he doesn't move great without the ball. I would say the team as a whole could really improve even just the way they set screens. So like yeah, he was someone who I was skeptical of coming into the season, but as I would say has impressed me with how good he's been as a roller. I think his rebounding is legit. He's going to give up some on the defensive end because of the height, but at least he, like you mentioned, probably the strongest. And HD can unlock a little bit of like a nasty attitude, a little bit of like an Ingram or Cormac Ryan-esque psycho nature. Maybe he's the one who emerges as the answer despite the height deficiencies. And he does have like a 7 something wingspan, so theoretically he could give a little resistance there. But yeah,
And what I was quickly on Lubin, like what I was encouraged about him is he was a starter for the SEC last year. Like he's
mhm.
been through battles. He probably was more of a focus on Vanderbilt's offense last year and got more touches and opportunities than you can get this year. But it was encouraging to me to like realize that UNC was getting a SEC starter who's gone against all these really talented
Mhm.
SEC teams. So
Yeah.
you want to think that experience will help him in the conference games and against teams like Alabama and Florida coming up.
Yeah, yeah. And to that point, like you said, first of the SEC tests against Alabama. I would say, like from the Tide's perspective, they have a lot of size, but I don't think it's necessarily translated to being as dominant as you'd expect. I think Cliff Amorie might be playing less than 20 minutes a game. I know he
Yes.
only, yeah, which I mean, I, Cliff would have played like 30 a game at UNC. Let's just, which is a little bit frustrating.
Averaging 17.6 minutes, 7.8 points, and 6.3 rebounds.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
seems like they're going more with Grant and Darian Reed splitting some minutes with Amore.
yeah. That uh with Cliff there, that I think the front court pairing with him and Grant Nelson is a little bit clunky, and they've played a lot of their sophomore Mo Diabate, who's only 6'7", but he's a dog. He's their best defender, comes up with all the hustle plays, block shots, grabs rebounds, plays way bigger than he is. So yeah, they've leaned on like the Nelson and Diabate pairing a lot. They've leaned on Jaron Stevenson at the four a good bit. I will say if they play Cliff, they and you saw Oregon exploit this in the Players Era tournament. They've been playing Cliff in drop coverage, and Oregon's guards they were able to get to the in between game, hit floaters over Cliff to where as I'm watching that, I'm like, this would be a great game for RJ to get right with those pull up jumpers, with his ability to hit floaters, to start to see the ball go in, especially on his home court. Aside from that front court, though they've force fed some minutes to Jaron Stevenson at the three, which has seemed really clunky, but it does appear that more recently they're relying more on their three guards, very much like Carolina has with Mark Sears, Aiden Holloway, LeBaron Philon, and Latrell Wrightsell's another one of their guards who gets a lot of minutes off the bench. But Philon, for those who haven't watched this game, was a Kansas commit, defected late in the cycle when Kansas signed AJ Storr. Nate Oates scooped him up, Link Academy prospect. Kind of this like true point guard archetype with how he's able to facilitate, but he has the size and the wingspan to slide down to the three as well and function in lineups with Mark Sears and Aiden Holloway, who are two smaller guards. Latrell Wrightsell as well, not a huge guy by any means. And in that sense, Carolina matches up with them well. There's not really going to be a size advantage on the perimeter unless they turn to Darian Reed, five-star freshman who's really talented perimeter player, but yeah, not he's hasn't been getting a ton of minutes recently. So I think there is surprisingly things for Carolina to like about this matchup. Assuming that this Nelson Cliff Amore front court doesn't just magically click, they dominate Carolina on the glass. Let's talk a little bit about what this game means, Ross. Why do you think this game is so important for Carolina to win?
Yeah, I'm glad you got all that preview stuff out of there. I'll be honest with you, when I've podcasting history, I'm not a huge preview guy. I don't scout the other team as much as I probably should. So that was
Hey, all
helpful for
good.
me to kind of hear the roster. But I do know these names, doing a lot of college basketball recruiting stuff with our team at 247 Sports. I hear these names and LeBaron Philon, is that his name?
Philon.
Philon. Philon. I mean, Link Academy, they're cranking out recruits. I've heard
Yeah.
his name before. Darren Reed.
Phylon's disgusting, dude. He can't really guard. That's Alabama's overall. I shouldn't say can't really guard. He again his wingspan, he's able to get steals and stuff, but it sort of feels like Alabama's best offensive players can't defend well, and their best defensive players can't score well.
Yeah, and Alabama's come off a loss to Oregon, like you said, and then they've also lost to Purdue. In some tough battles, though, they killed Illinois
Mhm.
187, and they had a tough win over Houston. I watched a little bit of that in overtime, 85-80 in one of the Fee Suite games. So they're sitting at 6-2. Yeah, I mean, I think Alabama's become kind of a rival for UNC. There's been some recruiting battles. The aforementioned Jaron Stevenson kind of spurning UNC from Pittsburgh and going to Alabama. Nate Oates and Alabama knocked UNC out of the NCAA tournament and with a team that UNC probably thought, UNC fans thought they're going to win that game. They were on paper maybe the better team, and you had this game of a lifetime from Grant Nelson and just shot the lights out in the second half to knock UNC. So I think there's a little animosity here. Also, now I think about it, they played in the PK 85. It was a multi-overtime game. I was in the building there in downtown Portland. And so they played the year before. That was my last year covering UNC. So this will be the third straight year, I believe. Is that
Mhm.
right? Third straight year
It
they've
is. Yep.
played.
Yep.
So there's a little rivalry here, and I think Nate Oates is this high flying, smooth talking, kind of new generation of coach that is very attractive to kind of how basketball's played now with the NBA style. And I don't know. I think some UNC fans are kind of jealous of what he brings from a high flying shoot touch
Mhm.
the threes. They're landing recruits. They're killing the transfer portal. They're kind of this example of what college basketball has become, and they're doing it the way that what it takes to win, whether it's legal or pleasing or traditional, but they've become really good underneath Nate Oates and kind of ridden that SEC wave where I think UNC has been had a little harder time adjusting. What
Mhm.
do you think about kind of those takes?
I think that's pretty well said. There's from what I've heard about Alabama basketball, they aren't like crazy NIL spenders, but they're really smart with how they use their resources. And Oates, like I think even though some of the pieces fit a little more awkwardly than initially thought, this team still has a ton of depth. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Aiden Sherrill, who's like their third or fourth string big, who was a top 25 kid who played at prolific prep. Like he's done a tremendous job of stacking talent, obviously play a fun brand of basketball, and like his brashness, I think resonates with fan bases that, yeah, I could see Carolina fans being a little jealous there. But like you said, it does feel like a budding rivalry. Hopefully, one day Carolina can make the move to the SEC and make this thing for real. But yeah, this to me is a game you got to win at home, coming off of like you're an Elliot Cadeau layup away from being 5-2 and feeling a lot better, coming 2-1 out of Maui. You can't let this one slip. You only get so many opportunities for marquee wins playing in like a down ACC with I mean Miami, who was supposed to be one of the top half teams, just lost at home to Charleston Southern. The ACC is bad again. It's worse than it was last year. I think it's really bleak. To where I'm like, you get this team at a home spot, they're struggling a little bit. Like they've had some defensive issues. You've had some defensive issues. You got to get it done after losing to them the last two times you played.
Yeah, it's a tough ask though. I mean, so UNC's 4-3. They lose on Wednesday to Bama. They're 4-4. Staring down Georgia Tech on Saturday. They have Florida coming up and UCLA as well before kind of January rolls around. So this would be a great bounce back win in front of a home crowd. I think a lot of fans, like we started in the beginning of the podcast, like coming out of Maui, you're kind of depressed with the outlook for this team, kind of getting manhandled, beat down by Auburn. The 85-72 score of that game wasn't representative of how bad the Tigers beat the Tar Heels. And I think Auburn's one of the best teams in the nation and could move up very high, I think, in the AP poll that's going to be released on Monday, recording this on Sunday night. And then Michigan State was a game that you could have won, they didn't. So now you're down this, and there's so many weaknesses were exposed. We talked about the
Mhm.
deficiencies in the front court, some issues in the back court, some rotational issues, some defensive issues. So coming out of that, UNC fans are a little like down, a little depressed. They're seeing how the season could go against good teams, and so getting a win against Bama would be huge. It would
Mhm.
turn things around. I think it would be a big time win that could pay off down the stretch for the NCAA tournament seedings. And I think getting one on Bama after losing in the last two seasons and losing out in some recruiting battles would be huge for like the morale of the program moving forward. Um, because like 4-4 on December 4th is I don't think many UNC fans are used to that.
No, not at all. And to that point, well, I'll transition us here out of Alabama talk by using Alabama as a segue. Carolina has an opening at the football, excuse me, at their football head coaching position, and let's spend 2 to 3 minutes on that. And I mentioned Alabama specifically because I've seen Kane Womack, their defensive coordinator. His name has been thrown out there. We're hearing about Glenn Schumann from Georgia, Georgia's defensive coordinator, Tulane coach John Summerall. All these names being thrown into the mix. Ross, I know you were tweeting about scavenging the message boards, looking at different.
Yeah.
What are you reading? What are you hearing about this coaching search? And even what direction would you like to see Carolina go here?
Yeah, and first of all, I want to pump my podcast. Rate, review, subscribe, follow. Big hitters only on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Some synergy here with what you're doing, Riley. And I appreciate the chance to come on. Yeah, dude, I've been living on the message boards. I don't know. I've gotten really into football after covering the team for 8 years. and covering recruiting, getting really involved with sources and coaches, and I just love UNC football, and it's just fun to have a winner. So I am very invested in UNC football. I think the game experience is awesome. So I really want UNC to have an awesome program, and this is a huge hire. I don't know where it's going. The names you're hearing are the names you mentioned. Glenn Schulman, the defensive coordinator at Georgia, is a popular one, and John Summerall at Tulane is a probably the number one if you talk to kind of rational fans. Now it does seem just kind of from some sourced out stuff. I don't want to give away too much from premium info in South Carolina, but it seems like they're going to try to go after some big fish first. Maybe shake the trees on some sitting, I don't know, some sitting SEC or sitting Big Ten coaches that want to leave for UNC is a desirable job for a lot of reasons. I mean, I've heard Matt Campbell's name thrown around a little bit, the head coach of Iowa State. He's playing the Big 12 championship game this Saturday. And Tulane's coach, John Summerall, is playing in the AAC game too. So I think it's going to be, we're about a week away, maybe 9, 10 days away from this happening. I think the big issue here for listeners is that National Signing Day is December 4th. UNC has 10 recruits right now committed. I'm not sure how many are going to sign. They have a really good quarterback out of East Forsyth who took an official visit to Penn State. So he is very desirable. But outside of that, the class kind of sucks. So that doesn't matter as much. You want to sign some people, and that
Hmm.
quarterback is key. But the bigger thing is December 9th is when the transfer portal opens. Because they're going to have to flip this roster. They're going to lose a lot of people. I mean, tons of players going to transfer out, graduating a ton of people, and I think a lot of starters are going to be gone, whether to graduation or expired eligibility. So the transfer portal being open December 9th, and I think going until December late 20s, December 29th is a huge time. So you got to get in there and start getting transfers in to flip this roster around. Um, so it's exciting. I'm pumped. I mean, I'm excited to see what they get. Like, it's kind of you're investing in this player for this coach for like the remainder, the next three to
Hmm.
3 to 10 in the year. You never know how long. This coach is a huge hire for athletic director Bubba Cunningham, but there's a lot of sketchy things going on behind the scenes of who's really making the calls, and
Hmm.
that's a whole different thing about the board of trustees influence. And do you
Right.
head on the kind of message boards? I still work with them closely, and it's you can waste a lot of time going through the different coaching boards and coaching threads.
Yep. Really easy to get sucked into that vortex. Appreciate your insight though. And personally, I would like Summerall the best, but I'll be happy with Schulman. I'd be happy with Womack. But yeah, thanks for giving an update on that. But we're going to close it down from here and say, tune in to the Heels this upcoming Wednesday. Hopefully we see UNC get back in the winning column, handle business against Alabama, get a much needed win. But on behalf of Ross Martin and Riley Davis,